Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lifeline, the conversations that are defining the future of healthcare. Today, we're exploring one of the most overhyped yet underexplored claims in technology, which is AI is a 100x moment. And no, we're not talking about just a financial 100x, even though that is a VC perspective. We're talking about 100x across many different facets: productivity, healthcare, machine learning, and even more. So how does this narrative take shape, and what facets may move the needle the most? That's what we're here to find out today. And the real transformation ultimately may be in unexpected places. I'm very excited today to be joined by some leading minds and researchers in the field of AI. And I'd love to go around the room and just introduce them briefly before we jump right in and start getting into today's material. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rabimba. Dr. Rabimba, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Would love if you could tell our audience a bit about your background and your experience with AI systems.
Yeah. So I started working with AI a couple of years back during my PhD. I initially was a systems researcher. I worked mostly on blockchains, event-driven transactions, and all those kind of things before I jumped into the AI bandwagon, I would say. And my interest there has always been on the code generation part, more into the deterministic part of the LLM and how we can guide the LLM to plan better and do certain tasks. For me, it was always code generation. And that's kind of what built my background. I come from a high performance research background, and some of the tricks and tips I was able to do that. I was able to apply here, and that's what got me interested.
Awesome. Well, it's very great to have you with us today. And as it's been said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And so I tip my hat to you, sir, because I think that Ruby is a gemstone and Python is a snake. So optimizing programming and then code is something that I'm definitely benefiting from in my own life with vibe coding. So very excited to get your perspective on today's conversation and topic. And as well, we have Elod Varga, CTO of Shinsō. Elod, how are you doing today?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the intro, Ray. I'm doing good. For everybody that's listening, I'm just a builder. That's the straight line there. I've been pretty much building interesting stuff in the blockchain space, and then prior to that in enterprise for more than 7 years now. I've been in both sides of blockchain when it comes to technicalities. So I've been doing protocol engineering as well as smart contract and decentralized application building. And now I'm trying to make every developer full stack through Shinsō. And I'm super happy to actually have Rabimba's knowledge and support in trying to do so. Hopefully this is going to be a possibility and another 100x moment, because like Ray said, it is pretty important to not only think about the financial 100x, because there are tools that are always shaping us, and you need to be aware of maybe productivity 100x or a health 100x is going to impact you more than a financial 100x.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more there. I'm very excited to have you with us today, Elod, and unpack this 100x kind of multifaceted narrative that's emerging here. And of course, last but certainly not least, the gentleman who has certainly 100x my knowledge as it pertains to the intersection of healthcare and AI. We have Dr. Tuan Sao. Tuan, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Ray. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
It's very. I'm very happy to see Rabimba and Elod here, because when I read I think Rabimba got a ACM Distinguished Paper Award for his research. That is wonderful. Okay, wonderful. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you guys today. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm very excited as someone who is, as I mentioned, not deeply technical, but again stands on the shoulders of giants to be here with such distinguished and esteemed gentlemen such as yourself in the field of AI and then healthcare and then the intersections that all this entails. And before we dive in, we are running for the audience out there a $50 USDC giveaway. So for our viewers who are watching live, make sure to keep your ears perked up, and we will be announcing the winners at some point during the broadcast. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. We're looking at going from 1 to 100, and let's start by kind of just interrogating this claim a little bit. We're hearing a lot about 100x just in general, but when we talk about this number, this increase, it really is a huge multiple. Many folks who are in Web3 perhaps are used to hearing 100x, and we've kind of become a bit numb to it. But it is a giant leap in terms of compounding. Dr. Rabimba, I would love to double click from your perspective. Is the claim that we will be able to 100x research capacity and machine learning, do you think that's primarily just narrative and theatrics, or is there some real concrete ability to have these levels of efficiency gains within artificial intelligence?
So yeah, great question, Ray. And honestly, this is something I think about a lot, both from my research days and now working in trying to productionize certain aspects of it. So let me break down what I think it might mean or it means, because I think we kind of diverge towards like three different things here. So first things are productivity when we say about 100x. So doing the same things faster. So as an example, writing an email in 13 seconds instead of 5 minutes, that's real, but it's also incremental. It's a 10x task on the task that maybe didn't need to exist in the first place if you just had a different way of conversation or communication. But we can still call these at productivity. Uh, the second, there's the capability. Are we going 100x more capable than on some tasks maybe from before? So doing things that were previously impossible or maybe economically not feasible. This is where it gets interesting. When in my research days, we saw a certain, I would say, glimpses of parts where we can apply some of these, but the technology often wasn't there. For example, I always wanted that, okay, will I write my code, my unit test, I'll just come up with the ideas, it will do everything. It never did. So the technology was quite not there. Now it is when Elod and I were working on smart contract vulnerability detection, code correction. We aren't making human auditors faster. We're trying to find vulnerability patterns across thousands of contracts that a human team will have very trouble analyzing in like their specific time frame. And same with code generation, same with code translation. That's what I want to call like new capability unlocking. And third, the compounding. All of these are impressive, maybe, but are they really 100x? Maybe in some very specific domain. This is where AI shines, I would say, or the AI we have right now. So improvements stack on each other. So this is kind of like, I would say, the rarest moment where some of the domains where I see this actually happening. For example, healthcare is one of the domains where I can see a lot of these enablement going on. So that's kind of like how I see it. Healthcare, I have seen all these three happening. Blockchain security, I have seen this. A lot of these are happening. Drug discovery has all three. Marketing maybe has one or two. So that's kind of what I have seen from my research perspective. And I always ask, like, are we automating a task or are we enabling a new capacity? So the former might be 2 to 5x growth, maybe. The latter can genuinely be 100x or more if we target the right domain.
I love that perspective and then that bifurcation there. I would love to, Dr. Tuan, get your perspective, given that Dr. Rabimba, you had mentioned healthcare. Is what Dr. Rabimba described in terms of this automation versus creating new capacity, are you seeing the same thing at the intersection of healthcare and AI?
Yeah, of course. So when I see the title about the 100x, I think in healthcare, especially for the doctor AI or the AI doctor, right now I think it's like 1,000x because like in many countries, right, like accessing to a doctor is very challenging. But with the help of the AI right now, you basically have like hundreds of the doctor in your pocket, right? So if you are in the US, so we make a joke that there are more doctor AI than the real physical doctor. Yeah. So basically, for any of the vertical, the healthcare vertical in the US, you will see that there will be like one of the very specific vertical doctor AI that basically help you like mostly like 90% of the job. Of course, if you go for the operation, that's a totally different story. But for most of the time, family doctor, general doctor, and most of the time when you need someone to basically check you up, uh, uh, AI doctor can do a fantastic job. Okay, so that is basically like 100x or 1000x already. And another thing, like whenever you go to the hospital, right, you can see the doctor spends a lot of time to do many other like operation work, right? And so basically the AI, so for example, like some of the AI just basically like as a video or the audio one, just basically take the statement from the doctor and actually prescribe the medicine for people or taking note and doing a lot of things, so that like next time like the doctor only needs to spend like 5-10 minutes to basically do a truly doctor work, but 90% of the job is just basically the labor work. The AI can do like will have a lot of time. Yeah, so it's not like 100x in healthcare. I think AI may make it like 1000x.
I love that. The notion that we're freeing up the actual human component, the professional that requires that human knowledge and speciality, and freeing that speciality from the administrative casings around it. That resonates with my heart. As folks who can probably hear me talking, I'm an American, so I'm very used to long waits for healthcare and seeing the doctor for all of 3 minutes. It's like, oh, hey, okay, you're all right. So the 1000x sounds great to me. I'm very curious as well. Elod, you're doing some amazing work over at Shinsō. The notion of using artificial intelligence to translate smart contracts and essentially make this a lot more efficient, compatible, and composable. Would you echo Dr. Rabimba and Dr. Tuan's sentiment that we're looking at 100 to 1000x? Or how do you view the automation or the compilation of smart contracts in the era of AI?
Yeah. I would like to start from like a personal perspective, because I think putting all of this into context is going to really help people understand what is happening here at like on a broader scale in the big picture. Myself as a developer, or as kind of like a creator, pretty much I was just like coding instead of I don't know, drawing or talking in front of people. I was coding. So for every single problem that needed a solution, there usually, at least in the technical spaces, there is at least a tool that was created just to solve that in kind of close to an optimal manner, right? So this put us developers in a position in which we needed to learn and use multiple hundreds or thousands of tools in different use cases. And this kind of routes back to the same problem that Rabimba and Tuan were saying, that doctors are kind of spending 98% of their time, or they were using 98% of their time on admin and remembering, versus 2% in doing. And this is where all of this AI advancement is really helping us to really speed up our execution, because we have an easy way and a really really nice way, a really nice tool now in our hands to go back and collect all that information in a very succinct and a very very swift way. Now in smart contracts, and really pretty much in any system that has clear definitions, AI is going to be really, really helpful, and it's going to bring that 100 to 1000x, depending. I mean, this is very subjective. Like, just give there a number. It's a pretty big number, but it's going to bring that additional benefit to collect all that information, synthesize and analyze it, because at the end of the day, this is just a statistical machine. And if there is clear definition of what is happening in there, let it be code, let it be well-known diseases, let it be research processes that are well documented, or let it be I don't know, new drugs that are being tested hypothetically. AI is always going to be able to help us. Once we actually wander outside of the known boundaries, that is where research is happening right now, and that is where like the next set of questions need to be put up.
Absolutely, and I think what you outlined there, Elod, the stepping out of the boundary of currently what is known, is just a fascinating component of the conversation, because ultimately it seems like the surface area of what is known is increasing rapidly, and of course it seems that exponentially what is possible arises out of what is known. So the more we learn, the more we can do as a whole society, species, etc. And so that leads to a great question for Dr. Tuan here. We touched briefly on the amount of time this could free up for specialists who then can in turn serve more individuals and compound their efficiencies. I'd really love to double click, Dr. Tuan, on what this does for research. Elod, I believe you alluded to it, but what does this look like when we apply AI and the Life AI model, let's say, for research processes? What kind of efficiencies can be had, and how do you view those efficiencies having implications in healthcare, say 1, 2, and then 5 years into the future? What does this ultimately do for the entirety of healthcare?
Yeah, so that's a great question that I can share with you, like what we did 5 years ago when we tried to build, let's say, a stroke prevention DNA testing, right? Because there's about, like, I remember at that time, our database show like about 800,000 research paper talking about the different genetic variants associated with stroke. And if you ask a researcher to go manually through 800,000 research paper to summarize or to find out the variant associated with a particular stroke or another particular disease, it would take like years, right? And then, of course, AI at that time will already do most of the job, but a lot of work. But these days, this task can take like a couple of, let's say, a couple of minutes, right? And that, of course, the job of the AI will not replace the job of the researcher, because there is a domain expert over here. But the AI will be able to navigate through 800,000 research paper to pinpoint to a couple of paper, let's say 10 or 20 or like 50 paper, so that the domain expert can go in depth about how to leverage that information to basically build a new product. So I can talk a lot about this, because there's a lot of like model about people's, like, we call it like a super intelligent engine. It's just basically like it doesn't eat, it doesn't sleep, it just run 24/7. It just basically take the research, the existing research, and actually summarize and basically create a lot of like data insight, or the insight to make a new product. Yeah, especially in healthcare, because if you know like amounts of research public every years or basically every week about the new finding in healthcare, and if you need to basically try to analyze all of this, it will take you forever. And the AI doing a really good job to basically help you to navigate through a tons of information, summarize this, collect this, and actually help you to pinpoint the exact location of the paper, so that you, like, even like, for example, like 10, 15 years ago, some people talking about a very specific problem, and then the AI be able to basically link something together. Okay, so basically like it helped us a lot in product development. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And as you were speaking there, Tuan, and the research processes, it reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend who was he was working on his PhD thesis, and he said, for one evening, for about 3 hours, I had this beautiful glimmering moment of clarity, and I was able to connect some things. And as you're describing it, Tuan, it sounds like that is these AI systems, but 24/7, never sleeping and never eating, consistently making these connections. It's super exciting. And when you mentioned research papers, it did get me thinking. Dr. Rabimba, there's a concept called the Shkreli thesis. It dictates that nomenclature is shaping application. And as someone who is very language rooted, these language models have been very kind to me in terms of my ability to kind of speak to them and they speak back. But I've saw a really interesting thesis that these are systems that are more like reasoning engines. So I would love to get your perspective on whether or not we're maybe underutilizing LLMs because of how we're framing them intrinsically with language. What other applications do you think maybe we should be exploring, or maybe we're collectively overlooking? Oh, I think you're on mute, Dr. Rabimba.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for that. This is honestly one of my favorite topics, and I think that's one of the important blind spots in the industry right now. So here's the thing: this is like a personal take. We made, I think, a naming mistake. We called them large language models, and that single word language has constrained our entire imagination about what these systems can do. Think about what these models actually are at a fundamental level. They're not just language generators, they are pattern recognition and quote unquote reasoning engine, or I want to say planning engine, that happen to use token sequence as their input and output format. Language just happen to be the interface, it's not just the capability. When we train a transformer on a text, we are not teaching it to write. So we are teaching it to recognize a kind of abstract relationship between multiple tokens, multiple even sentences between concepts, to understand causality, to identify patterns across these massive datasets we have. The fact that it outputs English is because we started training it on that. Let me give you like a concrete example from our work in Shinsō. So smart contract code isn't natural language, right? Any code isn't natural language. It's so Solidity, Rust, Move, and they all have very different grammars, like grammars for programming language and parsers for that. But LLMs still are extraordinarily good at understanding it. Why? Because code has grammar, syntax, semantic relationships, just like language. But more importantly, they also have logical patterns that repeat across thousands of contracts. The model isn't necessarily reading the code the way it, I would say, reads an email. It's recognizing that abstract patterns that manifest across different syntactic expression. uh, and like you said, like, are we, where else we can apply this, and are we underutilizing? So I would think most enterprise software is about moving information through various processes, right? So approval, transformation, validation. LLMs are phenomenal at understanding these workflows and finding, I would say, inefficiencies or extra things that we are doing there. So that's one of the things. Then the other part I'm very interested in is scientific hypothesis generation. So LLMs have ingested entire published research, and they can identify connections between papers and in different fields that we have very trouble finding it, because we don't have the knowledge of all the available published research at all. And this is something I think no human, even teams, probably can do together. But if they can find patterns, they can find connections between different methods in different domains, that is something I'm very excited about, especially in hypothesis generation. Then something I'm interested is our own work, so anomaly detection in complex systems, and again, the whole aspect that we can ingest multimodal data through it. So the linguistic bias has created a massive, I would say, market here. Everybody is building chatbots, while the real, I would say, applications might be something on the process optimization part, maybe pattern detection, scientific research, scientific hypothesis generation, code analysis, all these. So that's what I think will eventually come up as one of the huge aspects where these can be used.
I absolutely love that, Dr. Rabimba. It just in my mind makes me think it's like, we really wouldn't have some of these innovations unless, we almost have like a joke situation where a physicist, an anthropologist, and a linguistic researcher walk into a bar, and then they're able to compare the most recent papers, and aha, we have it. But AI is doing that constantly, which is phenomenal. We're able to get this percolation of collective human knowledge that otherwise would be kind of situationally rare. And I love the notion of language and linguistic framing being kind of the innate, well, we're currently using language now, so it makes sense we started with that. But it is a bit limiting. Elod, I'd love to get your thoughts, because I know over at Shinsō, you all are doing some phenomenal work towards that end. It's the perfect example of applying AI beyond just language. Can you explain a little bit about how you're using this for code transformation, vulnerability detection, and how did you arrive at applying this technology for these purposes?
I think it's fairly simple to answer this question. Like Rabimba was saying, probably the underlying technology is much more well suited when it comes to pattern recognition, when it comes to optimizations, when it comes to really, I would say, forcing the boundaries, or kind of like being on the borderline of the known boundaries of what we already know inside these well defined and clear systems of information. Now, since we are doing our pilot in smart contracts and in the blockchain space itself, um, I like to explain or to present smart contracts, just as a simple analogy to people, as simply, before smart contracts we had processes. Enterprises had dozens of them, millions of them. Now in smart contracts we should just think about them as basically these processes coded and automated, and they are executed somewhere else in a common ledger, but practically it's the same process, is the same mental model, is the same thought and the same actions that happened before. It's not something that was, like, I don't know, dreamt of and created in the last 10 years. People were moving money in one way or form. People were registering votes. People were doing most, if not all, of the things that are happening in the blockchain space before that too. It's just a more optimized, a more clear, and a more, I would say, audit friendly environment for all of these actions to happen. Now, this is the perfect environment for AI models to actually succeed on, because they have all the clarity that they require for them to first and foremost find out patterns, because smart contracts, in most of the I would say more advanced blockchain decentralized ledger technologies are built on standards. Now these standard implementations are pretty much the same boilerplate code that is being written and deployed again and again and again and again on the blockchain itself. So just think about it like you have a photo that is of a dog, and then you have that dog inside every other photo. Like any AI model is going to detect that, oh, okay, this dog, I've seen this before. What was that dog doing? I mean, it was barking. So if I've seen that dog bark on 100 photos, then on the 101st, it's also going to bark, right? That's pretty much the same analogy that we are using to actually detect when vulnerabilities as well as patterns in smart contracts.
Absolutely love that, and it reminds me of a bit of the classic Pavlovian situation. You know, why is it when every time I see a yellow M, my mouth waters and I think, man, I can do French fries. It works well across all things, it seems. And I love Elod as well. You know, what you touched on in terms of blockchain and these smart contracts. You know, specifically. One thing folks outside of the industry maybe see kind of on-chain ledgerization as is a bit risky. But as I made aware, you recently won a ACM Distinguished Paper Award for research on AI-powered vulnerability detection. I'd love to, just if you can, briefly touch on that, and then as well hear Dr. Rabimba's take on kind of the implications of this paper and what security looks like as we're getting into the era of AI.
My short take on this is simply, again, blockchain itself and smart contracts are, in most of the cases, very like they are linearly executable pathways. So that means that you can validate quite a lot of execution patterns, even if that code is not running. So that is helping us shape basically very very nice security flows and security auditing tools, so that we can prove that a vulnerability is there even without actually getting an exploit, because once you're exploited, like that audit is pointless anymore. So what we are doing there is, first and foremost, based on this pattern recognition, we are trying to recreate the actual vulnerability and the attack itself. And once you have the precedent, then obviously you can build the tool, you can build the code itself in a way that, like, yes, this is not going to be affected by that vulnerability ever again. But I think Rabimba, if you can jump right in here, he is going to be the person to deep dive into what is happening in the model level.
Yeah. So let me geek out for a minute. So the key innovation in transformer is the attention mechanism, right? So before transformers, neural networks proceeded sequentially, linearly, one token at a time, building up context as they went. In transformers, can attend to the entire sequence simultaneously and learn each parts of the inputs relevant to each other. Uh, what happens when we train for code analysis specifically? So, uh, when Elod and I we started developing our vulnerability detection system, we didn't just fine tune a language model on code. We trained it on paired of examples, vulnerability code, and the specific vulnerability type. Over millions of examples, the model learns abstract patterns that constitute, I would say, vulnerability, or what we want to actually say bad patterns. They might or might not be vulnerable, but they are code patterns we don't want to see in our code. And then we have other methods to actually see if they are vulnerable. Things like unchecked external calls, re-entrancy conditions, integer overflow patterns. What's remarkable is that the model learns patterns that generalize. It doesn't just memorize specific bugs. It learns, I would say, the abstract shape, what makes the code vulnerable, what we want to call bad patterns. This is why it can find model vulnerabilities that weren't in the training set at all. It's trying to genuinely plan about the code structure, not just pattern matching.
That is fascinating. I love the analogy and the explanation you made about simultaneous uh, kind of connections that are made. Again, with my non-technical bag of language, seeking what fits in the holes here. That's fascinating, and I would love to kind of thread this because I'm seeing some connection here. Dr. Tuan, healthcare naturally is, just from my understanding, a great fit here. There's tons of non-linguistic data that's coming out of here. So I'd love to get your reaction to what Elod and Dr. Rabimba have laid out here in terms of non-linguistic data and the capacity for artificial intelligence to utilize this data. How's AI utilizing AI in this way for this non-linguistic data? And how do you see this having implications for not just life AI, but healthcare as a whole as we begin to apply AI, not just for words, but for even more things?
Yeah. So anyway, so I think Rabimba made a great point in explaining about the transformer and the LLM. However, in healthcare and starting a lot of things in, like, for example, like not only in healthcare but in, like, let's say, self-driving car. So people now starting talking about building the world model instead of like just a LLM, right? So LLM do a great job, for example, when you do chatting, interacting with them to try to understand something. But if you want to really build at a human to understand the nature, right? For example, also the emotion about, okay, how do you react with that? And for example, if you want to map out the mental health problem, right? So basically, word model is just basically builds the virtual world around you. Okay, so the way how you perceive the world is actually a more challenging problem, and people are trying to solve it right now. And so let me pick of something very specific in healthcare. Okay, pattern matching, a lot of things AI can do really well. And helping, like, for example, doing a repeated job for the doctor and doing a lot of things like a family doctor to basically diagnostic something. Leave it aside because the existing AI doing a really good job. Now, thinking about, like, for example, the AI become your assistant, the companion, right? So let's say that a lot of, like, you can see, you can go to Apple Store and you can find like thousands of different, like, doctor AI. But the way we build a doctor AI at Life AI is just basically, let's say, it's an application for the one you learn. Okay, so let's talk about this way. Okay, so a lot of, like, healthcare app will basically remind you about taking the drug, taking the medicine, go and do exercise, even like, hey, every 30 minutes you have to drink water. Okay, so the AI or the AI can do this one fantastic. However, but we realize that okay, in many of the culture, the woman in the family just basically try to take care for the husband, right? Try to say, okay, I want to make sure that the people I love, they are healthier. A lot of people, they may not care about themselves, but they care about the family member. Okay, so basically the AI becomes a companion, not only to remind her husband to take the medicine, but also to create a lot of things so that you as the caregiver to basically care about like your children or your spouse and so on. Okay, so I see a lot of use cases and a lot of people come to us and say, hey, how can I keep track to make sure that my spouse lose weight, my spouse take the medicine on time, my spouse will basically measure this one, my spouse will go into the checkup. So all of that one is just basically somehow the AI become like build a work model around you, see what you need, and build a healthcare application on its own to take care for the person you love. Yeah. So of course, I don't want to go into the very technical part about the difference between the work model and the LLM model, but I think the work will move into started moving to the real world scenario where you cannot distinguish the AI from a real human to helping you to take care for the person you love. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that human centric application, the notion that ultimately we accrue resources and primarily use these resources to make our lives better. And that, of course, the core part of that is our individual health. When you feel bad, as someone who just recently got over a head cold, I can tell you, no amount of good food and good things is going to make you feel just as good as you do when you don't have a head cold. So I love this notion of AI having a human centric application. I'd love to take this and thread it back to the more technical aspects, just for our folks who are listening in who maybe like myself are not as technical. Dr. Rabimba, you mentioned something really fascinating about this notion of transformer architecture and LLMs, making them uniquely suited for non-linguistic applications. Can we double click on that just a bit? When you mentioned transformers, I thought of we recently had an ice storm in my area, and I thought of the things hanging on the power lines, like, please don't go out, I need my internet. Could you walk us through how these transformers work and what they are in AI?
Yes. So as I had just explained that the key innovation in transformer is attention mechanism. But what does it mean? Like, what is attention mechanism and why does it play a role at all? So what happens is that, and why this matters for a non-linguistic application is that attention is fundamentally about relationship, not language. So when we have the model, it processes maybe code, maybe a smart contract. It's not reading in any human sense. It's building a map in which tokens relate to which other tokens. In code, that means understanding that a variable declared on line 5 affects a function call on line 50 maybe. In health data, it might mean that recognizing a biomarker pattern from 3 months ago correlates with an outcome today. This abstract relationship mapping, and it works on anything that can be tokenized into a sequence. That's how transformer works. That can be code, protein structure, transaction logs, sensor data, musical notation. All of these have internal structure and relationship that attention mechanisms can learn. What happens when we train for any of these specifically? So they start learning patterns that generalize and doesn't specifically memorize that. So it learns the abstract shape. It learns what that abstract shape actually does. And how this has been evolving. So we now have the first multimodal transformers. So what I had explained till now might still make sense if you have sequence to sequence and think of them as text or at least written document. May that be in any language or any part. But now, since we mostly process text or code, but now the same architecture can also process images, audio, time series data, because they're all tokenizable essentially, and tokens doesn't have to be technically any text. The models will transform healthcare that aren't language models. These are models, as Dr. Tuan was just explaining, that jointly they can reason over text, imaging, genomics, behavioral data simultaneously. We are kind of like just scratching on the top right now. Current models have context window limitation, but techniques for expanding effective context are already there. So we can already use techniques like retrieval augmented generation, hierarchical attention, and state-space models. These all are different kind of techniques. Each comes with their own trade-off and limitation, but they are all there for allowing us to deal with big context. And the third, I think the most, I would say important, but the most popular methods right now of making the models, I would say, try to reason, even what we are trying to do, is trying to do a chain of thought and reasoning traces. We are now learning that how you can prompt this model matters, like, how prompting these models matters enormously. When you ask a model, think step by step, you get a qualitatively different output, which intuitively might seem like weird. Like, okay, you are supposed to think step by step, but that's not how these models work. There is no step by step notation internally for it. It's just a token generation. When you ask step by step, that token generation gets into a iterative loop. These things we can utilize. So there's active research on training models that are explicitly optimized for multi-step reasoning, not just next token prediction. This is where the gap between language model and reasoning engine becomes most apparent. And that's where we are right now. So transformers are genuinely good at abstract pattern recognition and reasoning. But the frontier is expanding what they can attend to, how long they can reason, and how can they verify their outputs correctly, especially at high stakes domains like what we are talking here, like healthcare or security.
Absolutely, and this is fascinating. It's blowing my mind, and I've heard before. Hey, just tell the LLM do things step by step, and it'll help out. How you describe that, Dr. Rabimba, I have to start doing that anytime I prompt now. And it's fascinating, this notion that it can be interrelated to not just a linguistic map, which is, for me personally, it's kind of how I see the world as a language guy. I'm really fascinated, Elod, I'd love to kind of get your perspective on this. When a chatbot makes a mistake and it tells me something like, hey, the place is open, sorry it wasn't, or it gives me the wrong city, that's a little annoying. But naturally, when we're not interrelating language, we're interrelating concepts and tokens, as Dr. Rabimba outlined. That, how do we know when something might be right or wrong when we don't have the language to map out correctness?
Yeah, I mean, when we are comparing all of these things to languages or any type of language translated information, that usually means that we as humans can decide whether it is correct or it isn't, right? In some cases, when chatbots go wrong, we can actually verify on the spot whether, all right, like what this chatbot gave me right here right now is incorrect, because I know that it is incorrect, right? Now, in more complex environments, this is not that easy, and there are quite a lot of, I would say, industry standards, um, and when it comes to all of these industry standard processes, probably the most comprehensive and the most well thought, specifically for like general AI use cases, is just using evals. Probably everybody that had anything to do with implementing any sort of AI inside their applications knows what this is. It's simply a process of you collecting a couple of golden standards, hopefully the more the better, um, of that specific use case. And you're just cross checking and constantly validating and looping and trying to teach the model so that, like, hey, I know that these 5 to 10 to 100 to 7,000 examples are correct. um, do your translation or do your generation as many times as you wish until you actually get up to the point that you're generating similar or ideally the same output for this scenario. Now, obviously, um, when it comes to highly secure or high requirements of security use cases like blockchain, because we're actually dealing with people's money, there are like layers on top of this. This is kind of like the low layer of how you validate whether your AI model is actually doing what it's supposed to do. But then on top of that, of course, you need to do unit tests that are testing the logic of these smart contracts. On top of that, you need to do integration tests so that you can actually see whether the smart contracts that you connect to some additional external infrastructure are behaving in a way that they are supposed to behave. They're not getting any type of malicious information, or you're just like having some business logic type of like problem, and yeah, your whole system goes AWOL. But the most important thing, and why, for example, I feel like the system, at least in blockchain, is built very nicely, at least for from this perspective, is that we have main nets, we have test nets, we have dev nets, which are basically just playground versions of the same blockchain. And you can actually deploy any type of smart contract code in there and test whether, all right, is this actually working in the manner that I anticipated it to do? And then you can do all types of integration tests based on that, while maybe even using the infrastructure that you have in place for the actual live mainnet instance. So this is going to like test it in a more rigorous way, in a more like a lot closer to actual production grade. And at the end of the day, the most important thing here is that first you need to make sure that every single individual element of your system is doing what it's supposed to do. Then test whether the system altogether does what it's supposed to do, and then test external like external effects that could actually yeah, do any type of unknown effects on your system. Yeah, I think you could layer this, but these are kind of like the standards that we usually do.
I absolutely love that comprehensive breakdown. I think it makes a ton of sense, and it really illustrates the methodical approach of standing these systems up. Dr. Tuan, I know you're in a very unique position because not only are these processes that Elod and Dr. Rabimba outlined applicable for Life AI, but additionally it's occurring in a highly regulated, crucial industry of healthcare. So naturally, these sorts of mistakes, when they occur on testnet in a blockchain production environment, they can be mitigated. But actually, we're talking about humanity and in healthcare here. So I'd love to get your thoughts, Dr. Tuan, on balancing the innovation speed and the technical aspects with the very real reality that we're discussing, the lives of human beings when we apply this technology to healthcare specifically.
Thank you. That's a great question. And we got this question a lot, that whether in healthcare, the AI can truly replace a doctor. The answer is still no, or let's say not yet, or like not in the very near future, because see, AI still have a very big problem of hallucination, right? It work really good at your assistant or the assistant to the doctor. However, at the end of the day, the doctor make a decision on the diagnosis or treatment or anything like that, because the doctor, in the sense that they are the domain expert, to basically leverage AI to help them to move faster and more efficient. But the AI, at least in the very in my own opinion, that in the near future will not be able to replace a doctor. Yeah, and so that's why I still think that in the medical area, we should have actually stricter or more regulated, like doctor AI, because like a lot of people basically, like these days, if you go to many of the developing country, people actually using ChatGPT to basically diagnose themselves, take the medicine, and go to the pharmacy and actually buy the medicine they want. And sometimes it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because like a lot of like side effect, a lot of things happening. And then a lot of time when the AI actually hallucinate because they don't have like the correct data to reason about. So I strongly recommend that people use AI as basically an assistant, but they should not replace a real doctor with the AI right now. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I very much appreciate the candid reality there, especially with the speed of innovation. It reminds me of a humorous comic I saw. A guy was in the hospital bed, and he had the scar on his side, and there was a robot. And he said, "Hey, I think the scar's on the wrong side. And in classic ChatGPT fashion, the robot says, "You're absolutely correct. Your astute observation has helped us. Thank you so much." Of course, the scar is already there, a little too late. So what you just illustrated, Dr. Tuan, that we're not quite there for the technology to replace doctors, but with everything we've discussed here today, the enhancements to healthcare uniquely are going to be really, really exciting. And of course, it's not just healthcare. We're seeing 100 X's in terms of compounding processes and efficiencies everywhere this technology is applied. So I'd love to kind of bring all this together. We've established that AI is real 100 X's and just language. In fact, thinking about these as LLMs maybe is a bit intuitive at first, but potentially limiting in terms of how we conceptualize these tools. I think the real question is, where do we go from here with this technology? And what does the future look like in the next 1, 3, 5 years as this technology mushrooms out beyond its nomenclature of just an LLM? Dr. Rabimba, we'd love to get your take from a research perspective. What do you think builders should be focusing on? Where do you think we're mostly underutilizing this, and where we can maybe give the folks out there who are more technical than myself a little bit of alpha in terms of directional capabilities?
Yes. So if I were advising anybody or founders right now, I tell them to kind of stay away from the chatbots and run towards, I would say, 3 very specific areas. One, where you can use AI for verification and validation. That can be anything. So everyone's focused on AI that generates text, generate code, generate images, but it's a very harder and more valuable problem if for a AI that verifies that is it correct or not. Can the code I wrote pass security audit? Can the medical diagnosis consistent with the evidence? Does this financial transaction fit normal pattern? Verification is inherently about reasoning over complex rule system, and exactly the kind of things the transformers can excel at. It's a much harder market for competitors to enter because you need deep domain expertise to go there. And that's exactly why I think you should go there. And I think that's why we are also building at Shinsō for smart contract security. The second is for process discovery and optimization. So every enterprise has hundreds of these processes that evolved organically over decades. Nobody has a complete map of how information actually flows through their organization, uh, and what happens when you have these key people with those key knowledges, which you have to reach out at times to kind of understand parts of these. LLMs are really good at these kind of problems. They can analyze process logs, documentation, communication patterns to discover how these are happening, how the work is actually happening, and identify bottlenecks. These are, I would say, not so cool type of work, but this is where I would say the real value add is. And of course, my favorite is that scientific reasoning. We have digitized most of the human scientific knowledge. LLMs can identify connections between areas that no individual scientist can see. I think we all will start seeing a lot of AI systems that don't just summarize articles or papers, but actively proposes new, I would say, counter examples, new ideas, or at least new hypotheses, which we still will have to verify. But these will start coming up. So connections between drug mechanisms and disease pathway, relationship between material properties and manufacturing process, these are going to be, I would say, the models are going to learn and present them. So those are gonna be like awesome avenues for people to try at. So most of the technical challenge I would say they will be solving is interpretability, domain adaptation with limited data. So builders who will win the next round, at least what I think is, aren't the ones with the best chatbots. They will win maybe the short run, but they're the ones who deeply understands the complex domains, recognizes the LLM's strengths as well as their weaknesses. So not just writing assessment, but build a proper verification and optimization tool, and that's how I think this can go forward.
Absolutely. And I did I love what you outlined here, Dr. Rabimba. One component in particular really strikes my heart. When I was working in bank auditing, there was a gentleman named Jim, older gentleman, and Jim was the only guy who happened to know that one collection of processes from 1996 that we needed as an organization. So Jim has since retired, but he did it at the right time, it sounds like, with AI coming in to weave these processes together. And as well, Elod, I know you're in a very unique position in the industry and with artificial intelligence as well. From an infrastructure perspective, what does the next generation of AI-powered developer tools look like? You mentioned having thousands of these. What does this toolkit look like in the era of AI?
Yeah. So probably the most widely spread one that we are using right now is this like integrated development environment based chatbot integrations, where like all of these models are basically acting as our assistant, or in the later stages, practically in the last, I would say, 6 months, we saw that Claude Code and basically all the tool sets that are being built on top of that can actually already act on our behalf, but we are still not there to give them full power on top of everything that we are doing. Now, the next wave of all of these things is going to be basically, once we have a verifiable layer of activities and a verifiable layer of I would say accountability for these models or agents, I don't know how you call it, then we can really step towards giving them the freedom to act on our behalf. Until then, we are just going to constantly get back to this position of, oh, this model did this, why? And we don't know exactly the pathway, we don't know the reasoning, we don't know the actual given information and context, we don't know what actually happened in the transformer when that generation happened, and simply we are just left super blindly in a position where an actual meaningful thing happened, and we just simply cannot trace it back. So once that is there, then we can talk about actual autonomous agents. Until then, I don't see pretty much any movement on top of it. With us, with Shinsō, this is kind of like what we would like to apply, or we would like to create when it comes to strongly typed languages, especially in the blockchain ecosystem for smart contracts. We are focusing on creating an environment that is friendly for both experienced and not that experienced developers, so that they can actually create decentralized applications from the smart contract level in a very dynamic way, and also verifiably. So practically this would mean that you have a tool set at your disposal that is enabling you to be the idea host and rely on something through the whole development path, because now it's kind of headless. Like you're doing something, but you're also not really sure what you're doing. We are trying to create a framework where you can verify and you can check what the hell is happening, as well as build like progressively. Basically, again, we already had agile methodologies, we had processes to actually verify what is happening. Now we just need to make it pretty much automated in the AI world, and that is kind of like where we want to go with Shinsō.
Absolutely. It's a very exciting future. And very quickly, before I pass it to Dr. Tuan, we have an exciting announcement. We have the winners of today's giveaway. I know you've all been waiting for. So congratulations to Conqueror Web3, Majidadi Beauty, Wangshen Dan, Shafi Tausif, and Ofarma Ador. I'm getting better with these pronunciations. We live in a global industry and an AI interconnected world, so very excited for it. And congratulations to all the winners. Please do reach out to us within 24 hours to claim your prize. And with that said, even more insightfully and importantly than that, Dr. Tuan, I am so excited for the 1000x that you mentioned. That's an order of magnitude more than the 100. I'm very interested as well for those at home who are looking towards this exciting future in which AI is integrated just across the board. What would you say is the thing that gets you most excited that is possible in healthcare today thanks to AI that wasn't 5 years ago? what's the thing you're most looking forward to 5 years in the future?
Okay, so people talk a lot about what AI can do today. So let's think about that, what AI can do in the next 5 years or 10 years or maybe 50 years, right? So we have this statement, or actually one of our core mission of Life AI. When you talk about preventable disease, so for example, like diabetes, stroke, many of the deadly diseases actually are preventable. Okay, so let's pick stroke as an example. So every 3 people, 1 person will get stroke in their lifetime. It's just basically 1 out of 3. Okay, so and stroke is just basically like a highly preventable. And because of the effective of AI right now, we can actually find a way to help people to prevent stroke way early. Okay, like completely prevent stroke from happening. That's what I expect in the future. So right now, 1 out of 3 people get stroke in their lifetime, and I hope that in 5 or 10 years from now, that will be 1 out of 10. Okay, and we used to make a statement in our team. What is the success of Life AI in stroke? That when we meet with our grandchildren, and the grandchildren ask us, okay, what is you doing like 20 years ago? And we say that, okay, we basically use AI to totally prevent stroke and eradicate stroke from human health. And then the grandchildren say, well, that's nothing. I never heard about stroke. So what, like, I never heard about stroke. So they consider it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So basically, like the what we do in the like 20 years ago in their lifetime didn't have any impact, because 20 years from now, maybe all of that preventable diseases actually disappear in the world. And I believe most of that is actually done by using AI, because it helps the researcher, the doctor, to do like at least like 100x more efficient. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Love that. It's a phenomenal take. And we have a real life corollary, just to draw an analogy from the real world. Smallpox is eradicated. If people didn't know what smallpox is, they may think it just shrinks you by a couple feet. Or the Spanish flu. It is not wanting to go and have ceviche and tacos. It is one of the most deadly pathogens, 1918. And we've eradicated these. So Dr. Tuan, I think what you illustrated here has historical precedence. We have the momentum and we have the technology. So this has been a phenomenal conversation. We were able to explore, just to tie it off with a nice bow for our folks listening at home, the true 100x in value, not just you might make more money, but a fundamental transformation of processes and where that's rooted. That it's not just rooted in language, but there's abstract reasoning and complex domains at play here underneath that make the entire thing work. And we're seeing absolute paradigm shifts from healthcare to manufacturing, everything in between. And the reality that we'll inhabit in 5 years' time will look a lot different than what we see today. So AI will likely exceed the hype with a long enough time horizon. So with that said, thank you so much, Dr. Rabimba, Dr. Tuan, Elod. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I urge everyone to check out Shinsō, check out lifeai.io. We'll have all the links below in the description and comments of this broadcast for you to check out. With that said, this has been Lifeline, the conversation that is defining the future of healthcare. Thank you all so much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, week, and month. Adios.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ray. It's been a pleasure.